Hey guys, today we are in Luke chapter 7, and we start out with Jesus going back to Capernaum. This is the place where Peter lived. This is a place where Jesus probably stayed the most, kind of headquarters out of Peter's house. And he goes into Capernaum, and we see that there's a centurion, right? A Roman soldier who has a servant who was sick. But notice it says who was highly valued by him. This is very unusual because it would have been normal if you had a slave that was sick, especially for a Roman who had a slave that was sick, you would just kill him and get another slave. But there's something different about this soldier. He cares about this man so much that what does he do? He gets Jewish leaders and sends them to Jesus because he's heard about Jesus and what he's doing and saying, hey, come and heal my servant, right? And these Jewish leaders come to Jesus, and notice what they say. They tell Jesus, these Jewish leaders say that this Roman Gentile soldier, it says that he is worthy. He is worthy. That's very interesting. He is worthy to have you do this for him. Now, we don't understand the full context and why they think this. I mean, we see that he's been a friend to Jews and helped move the synagogue. But even for a Jew to say he's worthy, there's more to the story than what we got. And so it's just an interesting thing that kind of just should illuminate as you read, like, wow, these Jews think that this Gentile is worthy. And so Jesus went with him. He didn't hesitate. He goes to heal. But notice it says when he was a far way off, so he's heading toward this Roman soldier's house, but this Roman soldier sends friends ahead of him and said, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy. It's interesting that these Jews say that he's worthy, but he says he is not worthy. So this just shows you the type of character that this man is. It shows you where he is at spiritually, where these Jews are saying, man, he's done a lot for the kingdom. He's helped us build the synagogue. He's helped us move forward in Israel. Man, he is a friend of the Jews. He's worthy. And this Gentile has only heard stories about Jesus, and he says, I'm not worthy. I'm not even worthy for you to come to my house, right? So basically he says, just say that he'll be healed, and he'll be healed. And he uses the illustration that says, hey, I'm a soldier. I have sergeants who work for me, and I have first-class privates who work for me, right? I have platoon leaders, I have squad leaders. And so when I say something gets done, it gets done. Jesus, do the same. If you say it's done, it will be done. And notice this, it says, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd, and followed him and said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such a faith. I know we talked about this I believe in Mark, maybe in Matthew, but I'm pretty sure it was in Mark. There's only several times in the Gospels that Jesus marvels, and they're always at two things. One, it's the belief of Gentiles. He's surprised at how much Gentiles believe, or certain Gentiles believe, and he marvels at how much Jews don't believe, the unbelief of Israel. And those are the two things that in all the Gospels we see that Jesus marvels at: the belief of Gentiles and the unbelief of Israel. And even says, right, even in Israel I have not found a faith like this Gentile Roman soldier who is an oppressor of Israel, right, has greater faith than even people in Israel themselves. Just shows us what type of faith this man had. It says, soon afterwards, he went to a town called Nain. Nain is in the Jezreel Valley. If you've been to Israel, you know it's the big valley. It's where David and Goliath had their battle. But it's about 5 or 6 miles from Nazareth, in a big flat kind of plain. It's a far walk from Capernaum. So Jesus is doing some traveling. And so he goes into Nain, and as he's walking in the gates, he comes across this funeral procession, right? It says that, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a considerable crowd from the town was with her. So you have a son who had a mom, and he's died. So now his mom has no husband. She's a widow, which means that she's going to become poor. She's going to become desolate. She's going to have to depend on her Jewish friends in that village. And so even then we know as we move into Acts that a lot of Jews, they didn't do that. It really kind of started at Pentecost, even though in law they're supposed to, but they just didn't do that. And so he comes across and he sees this man who's dead. He sees this woman who's a widow. He knows it's going to be a trouble for her. And once again, we see, right? We see in verse 13, and when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, right? So once again, we see that heart. He knows what kind of life this is going to be for this mom who has no husband, who has no son, and she's going to become poor, desolate, depending on others, poverty, all the things, right? He had compassion. But look at a few words before that word compassion. Luke says, and when the Lord saw her, he's been talking about Jesus, right? But all of a sudden he puts this word Lord, Kyrios. And what it means, it says when God saw her, right? It's showing, Luke is intentionally showing the deity of Jesus at this point. And so it's not just Jesus saw him. Yes, Jesus is God, but God saw him. God knew her future. God knew what this meant. And God had compassion, and God's going to stop and change that situation, right? And so it says that he came up and he touched his bier or his coffin. That's the word coffin, which is amazing, right? Because Jews can't touch dead people. Rabbis especially can't touch dead people. And so he's breaking Jewish law, not scriptural, not Torah law, but rabbi law. It was just the law of what they said, right? And so he touches this coffin and he tells them, arise, right? It's so amazing. He says, I say to you, arise. And the dead men sat up and began to speak. Once again, imagine driving to a funeral procession and you see the back door of the hearse fly open, and the guy that was going to be buried, he's waving and telling people to slow the hearse down because he wants to get out. I mean, you can imagine what is going on. But not just the crazy scene that's here, that Jesus is resurrecting this. Notice we see this time and time again. We see it with Jairus' daughter. We're going to see it with Lazarus in a couple weeks on a Sunday morning. Jesus speaks to dead people as though they are not dead. It's just amazing. Jesus speaks to dead people as though they are not dead, because in Jesus's power, they're not dead, right? Jesus will overcome death. He has the power to overcome death. And so he does that. And so he speaks to dead people and says to Jairus' daughter, she's not dead. She's just merely sleeping, right? This man who has already had a funeral procession, who's been calling out, they're walking out, they're wailing, the mom's going crazy. It's a sad situation. The whole town is behind him. He touches the coffin and he says, arise, get up. And this dude just busts out of the coffin, right? I mean, it's amazing that the power that Jesus has, speaking to dead people as though they are not dead. It's just an amazing story of God's power, right? And so we see in verse 18, after this, we see that some people, disciples of John the Baptist, come to Jesus. We've talked about this in the other two Gospels, so I'll just briefly talk about it. And basically, disciples of John the Baptist come and they say, are you the one that is to come, or shall we look for another? John the Baptist knows that Jesus is the Messiah, okay? John chapter 1, check it out. He knows that Jesus is the Messiah. John the Baptist is confused on the type of ministry that the Messiah is going to set up. Remember, all of Israel has been trained for thousands of years to expect this Messiah to be this king, this general, this one to take over the world. And Jesus is just walking around Israel. He's teaching, he's preaching, he's healing people, he's being with common day folks, right? It's not necessarily the Messiah kingship that everyone was expecting, right? But notice what it says in verse 21. After they ask this question, it says, in that hour, at that very time, at that very moment, Jesus healed many people of diseases, of plagues, of evil spirits, and on many who were blind, and he bestowed sight. And he answered them, "Go and tell John what you've seen and heard. The blind receive the sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news preached to them. And blessed is the one who is not offended by me." They say, these disciples come and say, John the Baptist wants to know, are you the Messiah? Are we looking for another one? They're not doubting his messiahship, okay? They're just trying to figure out, John's trying to figure out, what's the kingdom of God going to be like, right? This is not what we've been told. This is not what we have been trained up. This is not what Israel's expecting. But then Jesus, what does he do? He answers John in Scripture. In that hour, immediately, he starts healing. And notice when it says, tell them that the blind receive their sight. Isaiah chapter 61 says the Messiah will heal the blind. The lame will walk. Isaiah chapter 35 says the Messiah will heal the lame. The deaf will hear. Isaiah 35 says the Messiah will hear deaf people. The dead are raised up. In Isaiah chapter 26, it says the Messiah will bring dead to life. The poor have the good news preached to them. Isaiah chapter 61 tells us that the poor will be looked after and they will have a chance to the kingdom. And so he's not only are these disciples questioning him, he does the miracles in front of these disciples and then says, go back and tell John exactly what you've seen. And as John hears this, right? Man, the blind, the deaf, the lame, the dead, he hears this. He is hearing Isaiah. He knows that prophecy. He knows the word of the Old Testament. And this is like his check mark. Check, he's the Messiah. Check, 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 check. Oh man, he is the Messiah. This is the one. I have got this wrong. I was expecting something else. He's doing his own thing. Praise be to God for the Messiah. And so that's really what that whole conversation is about. And so we see, we kind of end the chapter with this sinful woman. It's such a great story. Remember, Luke is writing to Gentiles, right? He's not writing to Jews like Matthew. He's writing to Gentiles. So a lot of these stories involve what? Gentiles, involve sinners, involve people that were trying to get this message. That's what Luke is doing, right? He points out the Roman centurion who had faith, right? And now we get another one. And it says one of the Pharisees asked him to a meal. This Pharisee did not like Jesus, okay? He's trying to trap him, okay? He's trying to get him in trouble, trying to figure out these questions. And it says, and behold, a woman of the city who was a sinner. We could guess that she's a prostitute, okay? Probably a woman that everybody in the whole town knew. They've seen her. They've done some, they know what corner she stands on. They know what she does. Everybody knows this woman. This prostitute comes in with an alabaster flask of ointment. This is an expensive bottle of perfume. That's what ointment is, perfume. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. That word wet is the word brachio. The word brachio, it means to rain or to pour, an outburst of water. Okay. And so we get the picture as Jesus is at the table. Okay. And so they would lean on one arm, and their head would be close to the table and their feet would be away from the table. Remember, most people didn't wear shoes. If they did, they were sandals. They were open. That was just a dirty part of the people. So they would have them laid back. So they're kind of laying on their side, head closest to the table with their feet away. And this prostitute comes up and she just starts weeping at the feet of Jesus, right? The dam has broken and she's just raining tears on his feet. And not only of that, but now she begins to wipe them with the hair of her head. Notice that it says the hair of her head. It's Jewish law that a woman who is married will cover her head. Even today, if you go to Israel, a lot of women don't cover their head, but they're wearing wigs. The wig covers their hair. So it looks like they're not uncovered to be stylish, but it's still covered. And so we see that she's not covered. She's not married. A woman, not a girl, not wed. That's kind of what proves that she's a prostitute. Okay. She's a woman of sin. She's not married. Her hair is uncovered. Very kind of sensuous for that time. Right. And so she's not only crying on his feet, now she's taking her hair and cleaning his feet. And now she's also kissing. This is a very intense word because we're going to see this word in a few chapters later. This specific word, kiss, and it's the same word that's used as the prodigal father who sees his son return and he kisses him. This is that word. It is an intense, emotional action that this woman is kissing his feet. And it says, now when the Pharisee who invited him saw this, he said to himself, he's thinking inside of his head, man, if this man were a prophet, not if this man was the son of God, if this man was a prophet, if he just spoke to God, he would know what kind of sort of woman this was, and he would not let her do this, right? And I love this, verse 40, Jesus answered him. He didn't say this out loud, he's thinking it, and Jesus says, hey, Simon, I got to answer to your question, right? And Simon's like, oh no, okay, speak it, right? Well, what is this? And so he gives us this story, right? A certain moneylender has 1,800 denarii. That's 18 months worth of salary. Another worker has 2 months denarii. That's 50 denarii, 2 months of salary. And he says they both have debt and they're both forgiven. Which one's gonna love the person who forgave him more, right? And the Pharisee says, well, the one who owes more debt, right? And Jesus says, you're right. Absolutely. That's right? You have judged rightly. And he says, I have entered your house and you gave me no water for my feet. It was customary for anybody that you would have their feet washed by your servant in your house. You gave me no kiss of greeting. That was customary for anybody, man, woman, whatever. You would give them a kiss, right? Right? Or a kiss on the head. Or if you're ultimate Jewish, a man kisses another man on his beard. That's why I have a beard, right? And it says, you did not anoint my head with oil. Somebody come in your house, they would take some special olive oil that they had by the door, and they would anoint their hair, a little dab in their hair, or wipe their forehead with the olive oil. It's just basically saying, I love you. You're a part of my house. You are a guest. I'm going to treat you well. These are all customary greetings that you would do with anybody that you like that come to your house. He said, you've done none of this. You don't love me. You don't embrace me. You don't want me. You don't like me. You don't even really want me here. You've done not even the customary greetings, but this woman has cried on my feet. She's washed my feet with her hair, and she's still right now kissing on my feet, and she's anointed my head with expensive perfume, not just olive oil, but with expensive oil, right? She is doing this. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. And then those who were at the table with him began to say among themselves, who is this that even forgives sins? If you remember back in Mark chapter 2, Mark tells us that only God can forgive sins, right? And so Jesus is here saying, I am God and I forgive this woman's sins. He did not forgive the Pharisee's sins. He forgave the woman who had faith and who was in devotion. I know this was a long chapter. I hope this helped, guys. I can't wait to get into chapter 8 with you tomorrow. God bless.